hello, and welcome to the sleep story. However you arrived at this moment, whatever the day asked of you, whatever it left unfinished, you can set it down now. There's no hurry here. There never is. Tonight, I'd like to take you somewhere quite beautiful. A narrow river valley in western Norway, in the heart of midsummer, where the sun never quite commits to setting. The sky holds onto a soft amber glow, rose at the edges, gold in the middle, and the river moves slowly below it, carrying that light along without any particular destination. Along the bank, a small cluster of painted wooden houses sits quietly. A dock stretches out over the water. An old boathouse leans just slightly toward the river, the way you lean toward someone when they're telling you something worth hearing. We'll spend the evening with a woman named Mara. She notices things, small, easy to miss things, and tonight, on that dock, she discovers what it feels like when someone else notices them too. That's all I'll tell you for now. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to get comfortable. Adjust your pillow if you need to. Pull the blanket a little closer. Let your shoulders drop somewhere softer than they were a moment ago. When you're ready, and there's no rush, truly, I'll guide you gently the rest of the way in. There's no need to hurry tonight. Whatever brought you here, the busy day, the restless mind, the thousand small things that seemed to matter so much just a few hours ago, you can set all of that down now, right here. Right where you are. So let's begin simply. Together. Take a breath in. Not a dramatic one, just a quiet, easy breath. Let it arrive on its own terms. And then let it go, slowly, without any effort at all. Just like that. And notice, as you breathe, how your body begins to remember something it already knows. That it is safe, that it is supported, that there is nothing required of it tonight. Feel the weight of yourself against the mattress. You don't have to do anything with it, just notice it. The way your back settles, the way your shoulders soften downward, the way the bed holds you the same way it always has. It's always there for you, that quiet support, patient and steady beneath you. Your arms can rest now. Let them be heavy. Let your hands go still. Notice the warmth of the sheets against your skin, that particular warmth that belongs only to your bed at this hour, in this quiet. It's yours. Let it wrap around you gently, like something familiar and kind, and your pillow feel the cool, soft weight of it cradling the back of your head. Let your neck release into it. There's nothing you need to hold up tonight. You can let it all rest. Breathe in again, slow and low and easy, and out, long and soft, with every breath. The day moves a little further away. Not gone, just distant now, like lights on the other side of a hill. Still there, perhaps, but no longer quite reaching you. Your eyes may already feel heavy. That's perfectly all right. There's no particular place they need to be. You might find your thoughts drifting, that's all right too. Just let them pass through like clouds moving across a dark, quiet sky, unhurried, untroubled. And when you're ready, whenever that moment comes, and there's no rush at all, let your eyes close gently, and let me take you somewhere quiet tonight. Mara had not planned to come to the dock at midnight. She had been lying in the narrow guest house bed with the curtains open. There was no point in drawing them, since the sky outside refused to go dark, watching the amber light move slowly across the ceiling and waiting for sleep that didn't come. The room smelled of old pine and something faintly floral, and she had lain there for what felt like a long time, her hands folded on her chest, her thoughts drifting without settling on anything in particular, the way thoughts do when a person has finally stopped asking them to be useful. She was not unhappy. That was the thing she kept noticing, the way she noticed most things precisely, without judgment, the way you might note the color of a stone or the particular sound a floorboard makes. She was not unhappy. She was simply unmoored. There was a difference, and she understood it. But understanding a thing didn't always make it easier to carry. So she had risen. She had pulled on her cardigan, soft gray wool, slightly too large, the kind of garment you keep because it has shaped itself to your shoulders, and stepped quietly through the guest house door and down the short gravel path toward the river. The valley received her without ceremony. The Aurland River moved through it the way it always moved, in no particular hurry, finding its way between the smooth stones of its bed with the low, continuous murmur of something that has been doing this for a very long time and expects to go on doing it. That sound was the first thing she heard as the guest house door clicked shut behind her. Not loud, not dramatic, just present, the way breathing is present, the way a heartbeat is present. A steady, unhurried voice beneath everything else. She stopped on the path and listened to it for a moment before she continued walking. The wooden dock extended from the bank at the end of the path, just beyond the gate in the low stone wall. It was old, the wood darkened by weather and use, its planks worn smooth where many feet had walked them over many seasons. She stepped onto it carefully and felt it shift very slightly beneath her, a small, familiar sound, the creak of old wood taking her weight, like a house settling, like something acknowledging she was there. She sat down at the end of it, her legs hanging over the edge, her feet a few inches above the water. Below her, the river caught the light and gave it back in slow, shifting ribbons. That was the only way to describe it, the amber glow that hung over the valley, the color of late evening stretched impossibly long past its usual hour, was everywhere at once, in the sky above the ridge, in the pale faces of the wildflowers crowding the bank, in the windows of the painted wooden houses upstream, and here, most of all, in the water. The river wore it like something it had always owned. The amber light moved with the current, broke apart over a stone, gathered itself again downstream, and continued on. She watched it for a long time, not thinking anything in particular. That was what she had come here for, she supposed. Not this dock specifically, not this valley, which she had chosen almost by accident, dragging a finger across a map one evening until it stopped somewhere that looked far enough away. She had come for exactly this, the permission to sit somewhere and not think anything in particular, to be between thoughts, between lives, between the person she had been for 11 years and whoever came next. 11 years was a long time to be something. She had been a good one, she thought, reliable, careful. She had known where her coffee mug lived and where the spare keys were kept, and which of her colleagues took milk and which took none. She had known all the small things. And then, one ordinary Thursday, the small things had simply stopped being there, and she had found herself in a flat that suddenly felt very large, holding a cardboard box that felt very light. And she had understood that the life she'd been carefully inhabiting had finished with her quietly. The way a book ends, not dramatically, just a final page, and then the back cover. She was not heartbroken. She told herself this, and believed it. She was just not sure yet what she was. The river moved beneath her, murmuring over its stones. A bird called somewhere downstream, a short, bright note, then silence. Then the same note again. She didn't know what kind of bird it was. She had always meant to learn birds. She pressed her hands flat on the warm wood of the dock and felt its roughness against her palms and looked out at the water and the amber light on the water and the slow, even current of the river carrying its light downstream. And she felt the particular sadness of being somewhere beautiful and alone. It was not a sharp sadness. It was soft and familiar, like the cardigan. She wore it without drama. The valley was very still. The wildflowers along the bank, yellow and white, small-headed, nodding slightly, in the faint movement of air coming off the water, were perfectly still too. There was a sweetness in that air, floral and faint, something that had been following her since she arrived 2 days ago, present in the mornings and again now at midnight, as though the valley breathed it out. She had asked the woman at the guest house about it, and the woman had said elderflower, gesturing vaguely at the bank, and Mara had nodded and filed it away in the careful catalogue she kept of things she had noticed and had no one to tell. That was the other thing. Not the solitude exactly. She had chosen the solitude, had been the one to point at the map, but the noticing. She had always noticed things. The exact moment a candle flame stopped trembling, the way steam rose from a cup in a single spiral before it frayed into nothing. The particular quality of light on a river at a midnight that refused to be dark. She noticed all of it, had been noticing all of it her whole life, and she was very good at it, and it was both her comfort and her loneliness, because there was almost never anyone to tell. She sat with that for a while. The river continued its murmuring. The amber light continued its slow movement across the water. The bird downstream called once more, and she listened and did not know its name. She heard the porch door before she saw anything, a soft sound, the low creak of old hinges, unhurried, then the quiet knock of it settling shut. She turned her head toward the nearest house, the one with the window boxes full of trailing white flowers and the slightly crooked wither vein on its peak, and she saw a woman walking toward the dock. She moved without hurry. She was older, late 60s, perhaps, with silver hair pinned loosely at the back of her head and the kind of unhurried stride that belongs to people who have never needed to rush anywhere they were going. She was carrying 2 cups. She had what appeared to be a folded blanket draped over one arm. There was something about the way she walked, not toward Mara exactly, just toward the dock, as if this were simply where she was going on this particular midnight, and Mara happened to be there, that made it impossible to feel intruded upon. She reached the dock. She set 1 cup down on the planks beside Mara's hand, close enough to be within easy reach, not so close as to demand anything. She draped the folded blanket over the dock railing without comment. And then she carried her own cup to the old wooden chair that sat at the near end of the dock. Mara had not noticed it before. Or if she had taken it for part of the background and settled herself into it, the way a person settles into a chair they have sat in so many thousands of times that the chair and the person have reached an agreement. Mara looked at the cup beside her hand. It was ceramic, wide and plain, the color of cream, and from it rose a thin thread of steam that curled upward and dissolved in the midnight air. The smell reached her a moment later, sweet and light and floral, the same sweetness that had been threading through the valley air, but warmer now, closer, made into something you could hold. Elderflower. She wrapped her hands around the cup and felt its warmth move through her palms and up through her wrists, and she breathed in the smell of it, sweet, faintly honeyed, something between a flower and the memory of a flower, and she did not say anything, because it did not seem like a moment that required anything to be said. The wool blanket hung on the railing within reach. She pulled it across her lap with one hand, the other still holding the cup, and felt the slight, pleasant scratch of good, dense wool. the immediate warmth of it settling over her legs, the small luxury of being wrapped in something heavy and soft. She had not known she was cold until she wasn't. The older woman sipped from her own cup and said nothing. She looked out at the river with the expression of someone reading a book they know very well, not searching it for anything, just glad it was still there. After a little while, the woman said, "Dipper." Mara looked up, downstream, the woman said, her voice low and even, shaped by long use in quiet places. "Just at the edge of the shadow. Do you see it? The small dark bird where the water breaks around that flat stone?" Mara looked and, after a moment, found it, a small bird, compact and round-bodied, working its way along the edge of a submerged stone with brisk, purposeful movements, its white throat bright, even in the amber light. "White-throated dipper," the woman said. "They're here all year. In winter, you can watch them from the bridge upstream, walking straight into the current as if it isn't there." She paused, giving the bird a moment. "That's their whole character, really. They simply walk into whatever is in front of them." Mara watched the bird pick its careful way along the stone. There was something enormously peaceful about its industry, its complete indifference to the hour, to the unusual light, to the woman sitting above it on the dock. It was simply doing what it did. "What's your name?" the woman asked, the question arriving naturally, without preamble, the way questions do between people who are not trying to perform a conversation. "Mara," she said. "Sigrid," the woman said, and nodded as if confirming something she already knew. Mara curled her fingers more tightly around the cup and felt its warmth. The elderflower steam rose past her face, sweet and faint. Below her, the river moved, and the light moved with it, and the dipper worked its stone, and Sigrid sat in her old chair with her own cup balanced on her knee, and none of it required anything from Mara except to be present, she found. To her quiet surprise, that being present was something she could do. "Sandpipers," Sigrid said, a few minutes later. She was gesturing now toward the far bank, where two pale birds with quick legs were picking their way along the waterline in a kind of unhurried dance, their bodies dipping forward with each step, as though bowing slightly to the water. "Common sandpipers. They come in spring and leave before the summer is quite out." She watched them for a moment. "They're always moving, but they're never in a hurry. I've always liked that about them." Mara watched the sandpipers. Their legs moved quickly over the stones, but their bodies barely swayed. There was a quality to their movement that was both restless and completely calm, and she understood what Sigrid meant. She had the sudden thought that it was a very precise thing Sigrid had said, and that she would remember it for a long time. She sipped her tea. The elderflower was gentle on the tongue. It tasted the way it smelled, soft, sweet, a little like honey, a little like something green and growing. She held the warmth of it in her mouth for a moment before swallowing, and then held the warm cup against her chin and looked out at the river. She found herself asking questions, small ones, the kind she had been saving up without knowing it, the kind that had been accumulating in the quiet catalogue she kept of things she noticed and had no one to tell. What were the white flowers in the window boxes? Were those mountains on the near or far side true peaks, or just the ridge? Was the river always this color at this hour, or was there a night somewhere in midsummer when the sky finally decided to go dark? Sigrid answered each question without haste, in the same low, steady voice, occasionally pausing between sentences to look at the thing she was describing as though checking that it was still what she said it was. The window flowers were sweet, alyssum. The ridge was false. A real peak rose further behind it, hidden in summer by the full-leafed birch, As for the dark, Sigrid tilted her head slightly at the sky. No. There was no proper dark now until late July. The sun dipped behind the ridge for a few hours. That was all, and what was left was this. This amber softness that was neither night nor day. That was its own thing entirely. Does it ever make it hard to sleep? Mara asked. Sigrid considered this. When I was young, I thought it should. But your body knows the hour even when the sky doesn't. You get used to it. She paused. Or you stop fighting it. Which is perhaps the same thing. Mara thought about that. She drank her tea. The river moved beneath her, steady and unhurried, and its sound was everywhere, the low, continuous murmur of water over stone, the same sound she had heard stepping off the path, the same sound that had been present beneath every moment since she arrived in this valley, as constant as breathing. She had stopped consciously hearing it the way you stop consciously hearing your own pulse. And now she let herself hear it again, the way it varied slightly over different stones, a softer note here, a slightly higher one there, the whole of it combining into something that was less like a sound than like a quality of the air itself, a presence. Something steady that asked nothing. "Shall I refill those?" Sigrid said. She had already risen. Mara followed her off the dock and, across the short grass to the house, with the window boxes. Sigrid held the door, and Mara stepped inside. The kitchen was small and warm, lit by a single lamp on the shelf that cast everything in a soft amber not entirely different from the light outside. The walls were paneled in old wood, pale and smooth with age, and the ceiling was low. Herbs hung drying in small bundles from a beam, lavender and something she didn't recognize, pale green and feathery, and the smell of them was immediately apparent, dry and warm, a sweetness undercut by something earthier, something faintly mineral and woody, the smell of a place that had been a kitchen for a very long time. A clock on the wall ticked quietly. She noticed it the moment she came in. Not an intrusive tick, just a steady, patient one. A small voice in the room that had been there long before her and would go on long after. Jars lined a shelf above the worktop. Dozens of them, various sizes, filled with things she could half identify, dried flowers, dark berries, something deep red, grains or seeds. In the middle of the shelf, Sigrid's hand found a wide-mouthed jar without looking, lifted it, and set it on the counter. Inside, pressed and dried but still fragrant, were elderflower heads. She could smell them the moment the jar was opened. The same scent from the riverbank and the tea, sweet and light and living. Sigrid filled the kettle at the tap and set it on the old gas burner. She struck a match, the small bright hiss of it, the bloom of the flame catching, and adjusted the burner until the flame was low and steady and blue at its center. She set the kettle over it without hurry. Mara leaned in the doorway and watched. The kettle was copper, dented slightly on one side from long use, its surface burnished to an uneven gold. It sat on the flame and did nothing for a while. Sigrid moved to the shelf and opened a drawer and took out a small cloth and set it on the counter beside the jar. The clock ticked. The lamp gave its soft amber light to the walls, and the low ceiling and the rows of jars and the hanging herbs and the copper kettle beginning, very gradually, to warm. Mara breathed in the smell of dried herbs from the beam, warm and dry and complex, layered the way old places are layered. The smell of old wood, the particular sweetness of pine that has been slowly giving off its warmth for many decades. The faint mineral smell of the kettle beginning to heat, a clean metallic note under everything else, the smell of water becoming something else, and beneath all of it, the elderflower from the open jar on the counter, sweet and steady, threading through the kitchen, the way a melody threads through a larger piece of music, present even when you were not listening for it. She felt something ease in her chest. Not dramatically. There was no particular moment she could have pointed to afterward. It was more like the slow, quiet settling of a room when the door is closed against the wind. Not that anything had been alarming, just that a small tension she had not quite named was releasing. She stood in the doorway of this small kitchen in a valley she had chosen by pointing at a map, and she watched an older woman she had known for perhaps 40 minutes take dried elderflower heads from a jar and hold them loosely in her cloth. And she felt, for the first time in longer than she could honestly say, that she was simply somewhere. Simply present. Simply here. Not between one thing and another. Not waiting. Here. The kettle began its low, building hiss, a soft note rising at the edge of hearing. Not yet a whistle, just the first breath of steam beginning to form. She listened to it. She listened to the clock. She felt the warmth of the room settle around her like a second cardigan, like the wool blanket still hanging over the dock railing, waiting for her. "Milk?" Sigrid asked, without turning. "Please," Mara said. She had not known she wanted it until the question was asked. They returned to the dock. The river was still there. Of course it was. It had been there for longer than any house in this valley, longer than the dock, longer than any name that had been given to it, and it made its low, steady sound over its stones and carried its amber light downstream, and Mara stepped back onto the dock and felt it creak beneath her and settled herself at its end, her legs over the edge, the new cup warm in her hands. The elderflower steam rose from it in a single thin curl and was gone. She pulled the wool blanket from the railing and draped it across her lap and her shoulders both, tucking it around herself, and leaned into the warmth of it. Sigrid took her chair. The sky above the valley walls was perhaps one shade different than before. It was hard to say exactly. Not darker, not lighter, deeper, perhaps. The amber at the horizon had shifted slightly, taken on the faintest blush of rose, the way the edge of a flame does when it is burning well. The mountains that framed the valley, the ridge on both sides, black-green with birch and spruce, their peaks dissolving into the luminous sky, held the light along their upper edges as though reluctant to release it. And the river below caught all of it and gave it back again, slower, gentler, broken by the current into something that moved and changed and yet was always the same. The two sandpipers were still on the far bank. Mara watched them for a while, their quick legs, their forward tilting bodies, their complete contentment with the shallows. She thought about what Sigrid had said, always moving, never in a hurry, and felt the truth of it settle somewhere quiet in her. Sigrid said, "I'm glad you chose this valley." She said it simply, not as a question, not as an invitation for Mara to explain herself or justify the choosing. Just that. "I'm glad you chose this valley." Mara felt something shift in her chest. Not a great shift. Not the kind of thing that would be impressive described to someone else. Just something moving that had been still for a long time, slowly, as ice moves in warming water, not breaking but softening at its edges, losing the precise sharpness of its corners. She held her cup. She looked at the river. "I almost didn't," she said. "I was looking at maps and my finger just sort of stopped here. Fingers know things," Sigrid said. Mara smiled. It arrived on her face without permission, which was the best kind. They were quiet for a while, the comfortable quiet of two people who have found, without negotiating it, that they do not need to fill the silence between them. The river spoke for them. The river had been speaking for longer than anyone in this valley and would go on speaking after all of them, and it said what it always said, which was nothing in particular, and everything. The elderflower sweetness was still in the air, faint and wandering, not from any one source now, just present in the midnight warmth of the valley, rising from the flowers along the bank and the dried bundles in Sigrid's kitchen and the cooling tea in her cup. It had become, she realized, the smell of this place to her, in the same way that the river's murmur had become the sound of it, and the amber rose light had become the look of it. She had been here 2 days. She had learned 3 things about this valley, the way you learn things that matter, not by looking them up, but by being in them. Sigrid set her empty cup on the dock beside her chair. She rose slowly, in the way of a person who is comfortable with the effort of rising, neither rushed nor reluctant. "I'll leave you to the river," she said. She reached out and rested her hand briefly on Mara's shoulder, just for a moment, just the weight of it, warm through the wool, and then withdrew it. "Sleep well, Mara," she said. The way she said it, the name, was nothing special. It was a simple name, 2 syllables, common enough. But Sigrid said it the way you say the name of something you are glad exists, without drama, without needing it to mean more than it did. Just Mara. Her name. Said like it mattered. She listened to Sigrid's footsteps on the dock planks, the soft knock of the porch door, and then the quiet. She was alone again, but it was a different alone. She sat with that for a moment, turning it over, examining it the way she examined all the small things she noticed. The aloneness was the same in its facts. She was the only person on the dock. There was no one beside her. The valley held only the river and the light and the birds she now knew the names of. But something in its quality had changed. It was no longer the aloneness of being the only one who noticed. It was the aloneness of someone who has been seen and has set that warmth down beside her and is resting near it. She pulled the wool blanket tighter around her shoulders. She held the mostly empty cup in both hands. There was still a little warmth left in it. She felt it against her palms, the smooth ceramic, the faint remaining heat, and she breathed in the last of the elderflower and looked out at the river. The river moved, steady and unhurried. Its voice was low and constant, the way a friend's presence is constant when they are sitting in the same room without needing to speak. Simply there, simply the fact of them, simply the sound of them breathing. She listened to the water moving over its stones and felt her own breathing slow. The amber rose light rested on the surface of the water. It rested on the wildflowers along the bank, white and yellow, their small heads, perfectly still now in the windless midnight air. It rested on the old boathouse upstream, on its rusted green roof and its leaning wall. It rested on the undersides of her hands where they curved around the cup. It was everywhere. This light, gentle and sourceless and warm, the color of something good just ended or something good about to begin. She set the empty cup beside her on the dock. The river spoke its steady word beneath her. A sandpiper made a brief call from the far bank, one short note, unhurried, and was quiet. Somewhere behind her, in Sigrid's house, the clock was ticking. She closed her eyes. The wool blanket was warm against her shoulders, against her arms. Its slight roughness, something she no longer noticed except as comfort. The dock was solid beneath her. The river moved below, its sound as familiar now as her own breathing, the two of them finding the same slow rhythm. The smell of elderflower drifted through the air, faint and sweet, from everywhere and nowhere particular, just present, the way warmth is present in a room that has been lived in. The amber rose light was still there behind her eyelids, softer now, still. She breathed. The river murmured on. Somewhere a bird called once, from far away, a single unhurried note that crossed the valley and dissolved. She did not open her eyes. Her hands were open in her lap, the empty cup beside her, the blanket warm and heavy on her shoulders, and the light rested on her the way a blanket is laid over someone sleeping gently, by someone who knows exactly how much weight is needed. Not too much. Enough. The river was still talking in its low, patient voice, the same voice it had had all night, and she listened to it without listening. The way you hear rain when you are almost asleep, the way you feel warmth without thinking about warmth, the way you belong to a moment without needing to name it. She stayed. The light stayed with her. The river moved on,